And welcome back, everyone. We are right in the middle of our week-long RFL special investigation into hydrofracking. And as you saw, Kim Lengo bringing you an in-depth piece about how the dollars and cents have been adding up for one city in Pennsylvania. Now, here in New York, all indications from Governor Cuomo's office show that permitting could begin for hydrofracking sometime this year, but that's about all the specificity anybody's been getting to this point. But one thing that we haven't heard in this real debate has been the economic projections, real numbers, not just the anecdotes. And that's our question for you at home tonight. And here it is, everyone. Do you believe the economic benefits of hydrofracking outweigh the risks? And again, we want you to go to our web page that's been devoted exclusively to this issue. Just go to rnntv.com/hydrofracking and tell us what you have to say. And maybe by the time that we're done with this conversation, maybe a few of you folks here on the fence will be pushed in one direction or another. Let me bring in our guest right now, Thomas Shepstone, campaign manager for the Energy in Depth Northeast Marcellus Initiative, and Jannette Barth, an economist who is consulting in research business. She's the former chief economist of the New York Metropolitan Transportation Authority. Welcome to you both. I appreciate it. All right, Tom, let me start with you.
Sure.
How many jobs, how much money could hydrofracking bring to the state of New York?
Well, a tremendous amount. If we look at what's happening already with businesses that are located on the New York State side of the border and attracting business from Pennsylvania, we'll see a tremendous impact. For example, we had the occasion to meet a fellow by the name of Neil Giles, who owns a company called Vestal Asphalt, and he is doing a tremendous amount of business on the Pennsylvania side of the border. He's been able to hire about 60 employees. He's been able to hire 3 young college-educated people who are helping him run the business, who would have left the area otherwise. And we're seeing that throughout the area. We're seeing in Chemung County a tremendous a little boomlet from being able to service the businesses on the other side of the border. So we know from the testing that has occurred, from the ability of New York businesses to reach into Pennsylvania, that there's a tremendous potential for economic development.
Give me a number.
Well,
jobs, revenue.
There's been all kinds of projections, and I hesitate to get into those because we don't know how fast it's going to occur in New York. We have low gas prices right now. We also have a situation where the New York State regulations are pretty severe, and they may keep some companies from getting too deeply into New York too quickly. I do think they will come, however. There are a number of companies heavily invested in New York. I believe it will come, and I believe you'll see numbers comparable to Pennsylvania.
I'll only tell you, though, Tom, and give me that number. What are we talking about that Pennsylvania says that they brought in as a consequence?
Well, if you look at Pennsylvania numbers, you'll see that, for example, in Bradford and Susquehanna counties, they added, over the last 4 years, they've added 3,600 jobs in those 2 counties. So I would cite those as the example. I think that's where the potential is. If you look at those 2 counties and you look at the increase in employment in the core industries and the ancillary industries, 3,600 jobs is nothing to be sneezed at, and Bradford County has consistently one of the lowest unemployment rates in Pennsylvania.
Tom, briefly break down the difference between out-of-state workers and workers from Pennsylvania who actually were hired, because the complaint is, well, you're shipping in jobs from Texas.
Right.
That's not really counting for jobs.
Right. That is a common complaint, and of course there's some legitimacy to it at the outset because you're going to get the expertise from other places that have it. And clearly you're going to draw it in from Louisiana, Texas, Oklahoma, wherever. However, we were out to a site in Sullivan County, Pennsylvania, not so long ago, and we visited a drilling operation. And there's a day crew and a night crew. And I asked the foreman at the site who was giving us the tour, I said, what is the percentage of local jobs? And he said, to be honest, in the daytime it's about 75% local, in the evening it's 100% local. So that's the story. Now, it's interesting too that when you go to Ohio, where our operation also extends to, we have a lot of people in Ohio complaining about now Pennsylvanians coming over and taking jobs, or filling the jobs that are opening up there.
Well,
this is a natural progression.
Let me bring Jannette in this conversation. You go to some of the more depressed areas, upstate New York here. They'll say, hey, I'll take what I can get here. Let them drill. Can we put our hands around, because I've had lawmakers in here, and the lack of specificity in terms of what are the numbers they're projecting, how many jobs, how much are we talking for tax revenue that's going to go into the state coffers. Break down some of the data for me.
Well, there are a number of things that we have take account of when we're thinking about job creation from shale gas development. One fact that people have to realize is that the oil and gas industry is 10 times more capital intensive than the average American industry, and a capital intensive industry by definition does not really create a lot of jobs. You also have to be aware that when you hear numbers of jobs bandied about, there are a number of industries that will be negatively affected by gas drilling, such as tourism, agriculture, organic farming, winemaking in the Finger Lakes, outdoor recreation. And these loss of jobs are not accounted for in the job numbers that you see industry expounding on. Also, you have to realize that extractive industries are known to be a boom and bust situation. So we are going to have a long-term bust. So we have to think about the long term. Many of the jobs created are short-term, and indeed, even the New York State SGEIS, the Draft Environmental Impact Statement, estimates that to begin with, 77% of the jobs will be taken by out-of-staters. And they claim that after 30 years, that'll go down to 90%. But what's interesting there is that if you look at the Barnett Shale, where industry was claiming it would be at least a 30-year boom, it's really turning out to be more like 6 or 7 years. And so these are definitely short-term jobs. What industry claims in terms of the longevity of this industry is highly exaggerated. Let me also say there are a number of economic impact studies that are out there. Many of them have been funded by the industry, and the ones that have been funded by the industry all claim that there will be a great economic benefit, great job creation, great tax revenue, great revenue generally. And when you look at independent studies, independent research not funded by the gas industry, they reach vastly different conclusions. In fact, they show that over the long term, areas that have had extractive industries end up with the highest rates of long-term poverty and the highest unemployment rates.
Tom, what well, last night, Kim did a terrific piece. They got both sides of the issue, but when you go to Dimick, you get some pretty scary images, or certainly some scary testimonials from people that are there. Even if you subtract that and you say, all right, who's going to build the roads to support the heavy equipment? If we're not going to be taxing these industries, where's the net gain for the state? And what happens to the people they're building in the backyards, and they might have a deal, where they're leasing some of the land, but how the heck are they going to sell this when it's all said and done for property values? How much does the industry absorb of those ancillary costs, i.e. the property values, building up this, the roads and everything else that's got to happen, and a willingness to be paying taxes on this so that, in effect, you make the county, the larger community whole?
Well, let me address that by saying Dimick is one of my favorite places. I love going there, and I love going to the Cabot Picnic this summer when we had 6,000 people turn out from that community and say, we love natural gas and what it's doing for our community. Those are the people that everybody ought to be talking to. Instead, they're talking to 11 litigants. The vast majority.
Jump in here. I mean, there are people. Some of the Cabot folks loved it, right? But you didn't find just 11, wackadoos trying to knock down your door here.
Yeah, I have to say that. And to Rich's point is how much money, how much are these, for instance, Cabot, how much are they investing back in the community?
Tremendous amount.
Right, and we found out that to fix the roads alone, Cabot is paying they've paid about $18 million.
Correct.
That is a lot of money, and to Jannette's point, these companies have to pay money to continue doing business, to continue creating these jobs. So overall, how is this evolving?
Well, many townships in Pennsylvania would not be able to fix their roads to the level that they are now at had they not had gas money to fix those roads. And if you go into Dimick, you would see many roads that are improved to superb condition because of the hundreds of millions of dollars of investment by gas companies to bring those roads up to a level not just where they were before, but above that level, because they have to be above that level to support the additional traffic. And I would also point out that the study that you referred to, and we opened up this program, this segment, you talked about Tim Kelsey's report. Well, I know Tim Kelsey, and I've read his report. And the 18% and the 26%, those simply refer to numbers of municipalities. He did not calculate any numbers in terms of actual dollars, none whatsoever. And he did not talk about the Elk Lake School, which gets $1 million benefit from having gas wells on its property to keep. So you know about that. And the other thing that's not covered in that report is the fact that these roads are being upgraded to a vastly greater condition than they were before. And in fact, he does admit in that report, he says there has not been any significant additional costs on local communities. And yet they're getting a tremendous economic opportunity out of it, as those 6,000 people attended the picnic
You're only
indicated.
referencing one part of the transaction here. You're talking about all the money that these people are taking in. But Tim Kelsey also found out that the landowners who are making money from the leases and the royalties aren't spending that money in the economy. They're either saving it or they're buying a home in Florida. So it's not actually going back
correct.
into Pennsylvania.
That's
Could
not
I
correct.
also address the traffic costs? Because it's interesting that, there's the Fayetteville Shale in Arkansas, and it's been reported down there that that in that shale area, the taxpayers got stuck paying over $400 million for road repair from damage due to the gas industry. So if we are to have shale gas drilling in New York, we need careful planning as to how this would take place.
to do careful
but in
planning,
the New York
right.
State SGEIS, they don't properly address traffic costs.
To be fair, though, we both know New York hasn't decided to really do anything. It's
No.
very modest at this point. You, doctor, are an economist by trade. It's the numbers. And Tom, run any business, you got to have some cost certainty here, as well as also exposure, tax code, et cetera. When are we going to get numbers that the legislature can make an educated decision on? Every person I talk to, guys, on this says, well, it could be really good. I mean, even the mayors of Williamsport and the Chamber of Commerce said, we're really not sure how much is coming in and going out. When do we say, here, Albany, this is what it's going to cost, this is what we're going to make, and this is why it's an educated guess?
We don't even have the proper economic assessment done for New York State that was required in the SGEIS.
Well, they've pushed it back now.
That
Say
economic
in the spring
assessment
or maybe at the earliest of June.
exaggerated, vastly exaggerated the benefits, and it ignored many, many
give me the-
costs.
Well, that's
timeline.
your
When do you
opinion,
think?
Jeanette. Let's look at some concrete numbers that we do have from the Bureau of Economic Analysis from the U.S. Department of Commerce. And you referenced the fact that Williamsport is the 7th fastest growing economy, metropolitan economy in the country. Compare Williamsport, which is actually 30,000 people. It's the county that's 120. Compare Williamsport's 30,000 people with Ithaca, which has a similar number of people. Last year, Williamsport's economy grew by $247 million. Ithaca's grew by $35 million. And Williamsport has now overtaken Ithaca, which would be considered by most people to be a rather high-end area, has actually overtaken Ithaca in terms of the economic activity. Now, there's some numbers.
They are, but if you're a member of the legislature and you got to go back to your constituents and say, I voted yay or nay for this, you got to have something more tangible than pointing to some community somewhere else. They're going to look for certainty. The industry is going to look for certainty. I would say, wait a minute, what's my tax exposure if I do drill here? They're going to want to know how long you're going to be there. They're going to want to know, who's going to pick up the tabs for the roads and whatever else. I'm only asking, not if it's good or bad, but when do these numbers finally get laid out here in a coherent way so that all of us can say it's worth it or it's not?
I've been asking the same question basically by critiquing many of the economic impact studies, including that in the SGEIS, because we don't have those numbers. You're right. New York State is not ready for hydrofracking because we do not have the proper analysis or the proper estimates, the proper forecasts. We just don't have it yet.
Tom, the
Well, let me
president
see.
of the State of the Union said he likes the idea, okay? I didn't hear too much from Cuomo in the State of the State address, but and I got to wrap here, but just give me an idea, when will the industry or others come up with that?
There's dozens of studies out there. If you look at the Penn State study, if you look at the Manhattan Institute study, if you look at a number of other studies, you'll find all kinds of data. What I'm suggesting to you is nobody can be perfect in projecting the future. That can't be done. But we can look at the past, and we can look at what's happening in Pennsylvania. You said, well, we need more than looking at other communities. Well, what else can you do? You have to look at other communities. You have to look at other impacts. That's what Jannette's doing. That's what I'm doing. And the evidence is pretty overwhelmingly positive from my perspective. And I would say when you go to Bradford County, if you go to Towanda or Tunkhannock or those areas, what you see is palpable prosperity. You cannot deny it. It stares you in the face.
And you know what?
Yeah.
On that note, I think the audience certainly from you, Tom, and you, Jannette, have heard both the cautions as well as also the positives on this. And we want you at home to keep weighing in as well here. Please go online to our message boards at rnntv.com/hydrofracking. In addition to the message board, you're going to see a lot of what Kim got both in the field in Pennsylvania as well as from experts on both sides of this issue. Guys, before we go, why don't you tell us, Kim, what we got coming up next?
Absolutely. We have a jam-packed show tomorrow. We're going to devote the entire show to hydrofracking. We'll have an extended forum with top experts in the field. Again, that's tomorrow, February 16th at 6 p.m. And as always, you can tweet me your thoughts on fracking at Kim Langle on Twitter.
And I can guarantee this much, there will be a lot of disagreeing. That much at least we can be sure of. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, let's make a deal. We got the latest on the payroll tax cut, not just what's going on in D.C., but what it means for you. Stay with us.